My name is Marjorie Ellison, but everyone calls me Marge. I'm 71 years old, and I've lived in the same house in Cedar Falls, Virginia, for nearly 40 years. It's the house where I raised my son, Evan, watched him take his first steps in the backyard, taught him how to ride a bike on the gravel path, and cried when he left for college. It's also the same house where I said goodbye to my late husband, Thomas, after his long battle with lung cancer. That house isn't just walls and windows, it's a living scrapbook of everything I've loved and lost. So, when Evan stood in my kitchen one Sunday morning, coffee mug in hand, and said the words that would change everything, I froze. "Mom," he started softly, "Sophie's parents need a place to stay for a while. Just until they get back on their feet. I told Sophie they could stay here with us." I blinked. "Stay here?" He nodded, avoiding my eyes. "Yeah. You know, temporarily." Temporarily. I hated that word. It always stretches longer than it promises. You see, Evan and his wife Sophie had moved in with me 2 years ago after their apartment lease expired. It was supposed to be for 6 months while they saved for a down payment. But 2 years later, they were still here. Their daughter Lucy, my sweet 5-year-old granddaughter, had made the house feel alive again. And though I loved them dearly, sharing space was no small thing. But now, Sophie's parents, Harold and Doreen Parker, were moving in too? I swallowed hard and asked, "Did you even think to ask me first, Evan?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mom, it's just for a little while. Harold lost his job. Doreen's been having health issues. They've got nowhere else to go." I looked at Sophie, who was standing by the sink, arms crossed, pretending to be busy rinsing a plate. She couldn't even meet my eyes. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "It's just family helps family, right?" That line stung. Because that's exactly what I'd done, helped family. I'd opened my doors, cooked their meals, paid half the bills quietly even when they pretended to split them, and never once complained when they turned my garden shed into a yoga studio. But something in Evan's tone that morning felt different. Like he wasn't asking. He was telling. That night, I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by framed photos of happier times. The sound of Lucy's laughter echoed faintly from upstairs. I whispered to Thomas's portrait on the mantel. Did we raise a son who'd forget to ask his mother before handing her house over? The next week blurred into chaos. Harold and Doreen arrived with a moving van twice the size of Evan's car. Doreen brought her antique china collection. Harold brought his recliner that smelled faintly of cigar smoke. They rearranged my living room like it was theirs, swapping my lace curtains for something brighter. When I tried to protest, Doreen patted my hand and said, "Don't worry, dear. We'll make this place feel more modern." I clenched my jaw and smiled politely. The kind of smile that hides a storm. By the end of the week, every trace of me had been pushed into corners. My floral teacups replaced by Sophie's sleek mugs. My family quilt folded and tucked away because it clashed with the decor. But the breaking point came one evening at dinner. Harold sat at the head of the table, the very spot Thomas had always taken. I served roast chicken, my mother's recipe, only for Harold to complain, "A bit dry, don't you think, Sophie?" Evan chuckled awkwardly. "Come on, Dad, it's fine." But Sophie added softly, "He's right. Mom's roast always has more flavor." I felt my heart drop. Lucy, innocent as always, said, "Grandma Marge's chicken is my favorite." But Sophie quickly changed the topic, embarrassed. I smiled at Lucy, grateful for that tiny kindness. Children, I thought, still see truth without filters. Later that night, after everyone went to bed, I walked into the backyard. The moonlight spilled over the old swing Thomas had built for me. I sat there, feeling the night air brush against my skin. My hands trembled as I whispered, "Maybe it's time to let go." Because deep down, I already knew what they didn't, what no one did. When Thomas passed, he left everything to me. Every square inch of this property. Every penny in his savings. The house deed was in my name, and only mine. And while they were busy rearranging furniture and ordering modern drapes, I'd been quietly meeting with Reverend Cole Matthews, our family's old lawyer and a dear friend. He helped me update my will, set aside my savings, and prepare something none of them would expect. You see, I wasn't angry, I was disappointed. And that disappointment has a way of teaching you how to reclaim your dignity quietly, not with noise but with grace. That night, I made myself a promise. I'd move out. Not out of defeat, but out of choice. I would take what was mine, what I'd built, what I'd poured my life into. And they wouldn't even realize what they'd lost until it was gone. The next morning, Sophie knocked on my door with a strained smile. "Mom, would it be okay if my parents used your study? They need space for Harold's job applications." I looked up from my knitting, met her gaze, and smiled gently.
"Of course," I said. "But don't worry about me."
"I've been thinking it's time for me to make a few changes myself." She looked relieved, mistaking my calm for surrender. But what she didn't know was that my decision had already been made. I folded my knitting neatly, glanced once more at the family photos on the wall, and whispered to myself, "You took my home from me, but I'm taking something far more valuable." I didn't yet know how they'd react, or what would come next, but I could feel it deep in my bones. This was the beginning of something they'd never forget. It's funny how a house can change its soul without moving an inch. The walls stay the same, the floorboards still creak in the same places, but one day, it just stops feeling like home. That's what happened in the weeks after Harold and Doreen moved in. My own footsteps started to sound foreign. My laughter, when it came, echoed back like it didn't belong. Doreen had turned the dining room into her reading corner. Harold had taken over my study. Sophie began reorganizing the kitchen, saying, "Mom, this layout just makes more sense." Evan barely noticed. He was too busy working overtime to support everyone. And Lucy, sweet little Lucy, was the only one who still came running to me with her drawings and bedtime stories. But even she started picking up new habits. One afternoon, I found her coloring at the coffee table when Doreen said, "Lucy, honey, don't make a mess on Grandma Marge's old rug. We'll get a new one soon." Old rug. The same rug Thomas and I bought on our honeymoon in Charleston. I smiled politely, but something cracked inside me that day. I started spending more time outside, in the garden Thomas and I built together. The roses were still blooming, though no one but me seemed to notice. When I wasn't in the garden, I went into town. The library, the church, the small diner on Maple Avenue where they still remembered my name. I found comfort in the ordinary kindness of strangers. And slowly I began preparing. Every afternoon, I'd meet with Reverend Cole Matthews at the church office. He helped me go through documents, deeds, wills, insurance papers. I told him my plan. "I want to give them the space they've claimed," I said. "But I'm taking the one thing they've forgotten to value." He raised an eyebrow. "And what's that, Marge?" "My peace." He smiled. "Thomas would be proud. You're handling this with grace." "Grace doesn't mean silence," I replied. "It means knowing when to leave without slamming the door." But as calm as I sounded, there was still a storm brewing inside me, because what was happening in my house wasn't just change. It was erasure. One evening, I came home from church to find Doreen standing in my living room, giving Harold instructions. "Move that cabinet to the corner. It'll look better there." "That cabinet's been there for 30 years, I said quietly. She turned, startled. "Oh, Marge, I didn't hear you come in. I just thought this way it'll feel more open." I stared at her, this woman rearranging my memories like they were furniture. "I suppose next you'll tell me where to hang my husband's portrait?" She gave a little laugh. "Actually, Sophie mentioned we might store some of the old pictures in the attic. You know, make room for more family photos." Blended family, right? The way she said blended felt like vinegar in my ears. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, I walked quietly to the living room. I lifted Thomas's framed portrait from the wall and held it close. His eyes, gentle and knowing, stared back at me. "They're turning our home into theirs, Thomas," I whispered. "But I won't let them erase you." The next morning, I found Evan in the kitchen. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, his coffee untouched. "Mom," he said, sighing, "can we talk?" "Always," I said. "I know things have been uncomfortable. Sophie and her parents are just trying to make the place feel livable." maybe you could be a little more flexible? I stared at him for a long time. Flexible? Yeah, he continued awkwardly. It's not easy for them either. Harold's out of work. Doreen's trying to adjust. Sophie feels caught in the middle. And you? I asked softly. Where do you stand, Evan? He rubbed the back of his neck. I just want peace, Mom. I smiled sadly. So do I. But peace, I've learned, doesn't always come by keeping quiet. Sometimes it comes by stepping away before resentment roots too deep. That night, I made my move. While everyone was watching TV, I quietly went upstairs and began packing. Not everything, just what mattered. The wooden jewelry box Thomas carved for me on our 25th anniversary. The photo albums. My favorite teacup. A few clothes. When I came back down, Lucy saw the suitcase. Grandma, where are you going? She asked, her eyes wide. I knelt beside her, brushing her hair back gently. Somewhere peaceful, sweetheart. But don't you worry. I'll see you all the time. She frowned. Are you mad at Mommy? No, I said softly. Sometimes grown-ups just need space to remember who they are. Evan and Sophie didn't even notice I was leaving that night. They were busy helping Doreen set up her new guest bathroom decor. I walked out quietly, loaded my suitcase into my old Buick, and drove to the small cottage my friend Clara Jensen had offered me months ago. She'd moved to Florida, and her little lakeside place was empty. She said I could stay as long as I liked. When I turned the key in that cottage door, I exhaled for the first time in weeks. The silence didn't feel lonely. It felt holy. The next morning, I brewed coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sunlight ripple across the lake. My phone buzzed, 10 missed calls from Evan. Then Sophie. Then a message from Doreen. You could have at least told us before disappearing like that. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because I knew they'd soon realize what I'd truly taken. The following week, Evan finally drove to see me. He walked into the cottage, looked around, and sighed. Mom, what are you doing here? Living, I said simply. Everyone's worried. Sophie's upset. Lucy keeps asking where you are. I'm not far, I said, sipping my tea. She can visit anytime. He sat across from me, looking lost. You didn't have to leave, you know. We could have worked it out. I studied his face. The same boy I once carried on my hip, now a man torn between loyalty and convenience. I tried to, Evan, I said quietly. But every corner of that house told me I didn't belong anymore. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Mom, it's still your home. Is it? I asked, leaning forward. When was the last time anyone asked what I wanted done with it? When was the last time someone called it my home instead of our home? He had no answer. Do you even know whose name is on that deed, Evan? I asked gently. His brow furrowed. Yours, I guess. But... Not I guess, I interrupted. Yours someday, maybe. But right now, it's mine. And it always was. His eyes widened a little. He hadn't expected that tone from me. I set down my teacup. I've already spoken with Reverend Matthews. The house, the savings, everything your father left, it's all accounted for. Evan swallowed. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying I'm taking control of my life again. You all wanted the house?
Fine.
But don't expect it to come without conditions. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Mom, this isn't you. You're not like this. Maybe this is exactly me, I said softly. The me that remembers who built that home from the ground up. He left that afternoon confused and shaken. But what happened 2 days later made the ground under their feet truly shift. Sophie called me, her voice trembling. Marge, what did you do? The realtor called. He said there's a new legal notice on the house. I smiled faintly, though my heart ached for her panic.
Oh, that.
I just updated the ownership documents. No one can make changes to the property or sell it without my written consent. She went silent. Then, coldly, you can't do that. I already did. Her voice cracked. You're trying to ruin us. No, dear, I said quietly. I'm trying to remind you whose home it was before you decided to redecorate the memories out of it. The call ended abruptly. That night, Evan showed up again, this time angry. Mom, this isn't fair. You can't just lock us out of decisions like that. I looked at him calmly. Fair? You didn't think fairness mattered when you invited 2 more people into my home without asking. He lowered his head. I was just trying to help. I know, I said, softening. You always had a good heart, Evan. But sometimes good hearts forget to listen. He looked up, his voice breaking. What do you want from me, Mom? I want you to remember that home isn't built on walls, Evan. It's built on respect. And if you lose that, you lose everything. We sat in silence. The clock ticked. Somewhere outside, an owl hooted in the dark. Before he left, Evan turned at the door and said, Sophie's talking about leaving. She says she can't live like this. I looked at him with tired eyes. Maybe leaving will teach her what staying never did. As he walked away, I knew this was only the beginning. They still hadn't seen what else I'd taken. And when they did, it would shatter everything they thought they knew about me. She walked away with grace, but what she took would soon change everything. Don't miss upcoming twist, because the quietest women often carry the loudest truths. It's strange how peace can turn heavy. For a while after leaving the house, I felt free, like I could finally breathe. But peace doesn't last when love and guilt are still tugging at your heart. Every sunrise over the lake felt both like a blessing and a reminder of what I'd lost. Evan stopped calling. Sophie only texted once, a long message full of half-hearted apologies and quiet blame. Doreen didn't message at all. But Harold surprised me. He called one afternoon, his tone unusually calm. Mrs. Harris, he said formally, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we can talk. I almost laughed at the irony. The man who moved into my home without asking now wanted to make peace. Still, something in his voice made me pause. We met at a cafe halfway between my cottage and the house. He wore a pressed shirt and that rehearsed charm of his, like he was about to negotiate a deal. I know Doreen's opinionated, he began, stirring his coffee. She's just trying to help Sophie and Evan feel settled. I think this whole thing got blown out of proportion. Blown out of proportion? I said quietly. You mean me leaving my own home? He cleared his throat. Look, it's your house, sure. But Evan's doing his best. He's under a lot of pressure. And with you pulling this deed stunt, well, it's put him in a bad spot. I stared at him. Stunt. He shrugged. That's what they're calling it. You've made the house legally yours alone. They feel trapped. Sophie said they can't even renovate now without your consent. I smiled thinly. Maybe that's the lesson they needed. Harold leaned forward. You're a smart woman, Marge. But you and I both know that if that property stays in your name alone, it'll cause nothing but resentment. Why not just transfer partial ownership to Evan? That way everyone's happy. His tone was smooth, practiced too practiced. And then it hit me. He wasn't there for peace. He was fishing for control. I looked him straight in the eye. And why are you so interested in who owns my house, Harold? He blinked. Just trying to help the family. Funny, I said softly, because I heard from Reverend Matthews that you filed for bankruptcy last year. Your construction business went under, didn't it? His jaw tensed. That has nothing to do with this. Oh, I think it does. I sipped my tea calmly. You and Doreen see that house as a way to start over. But let me make something clear, Harold. My husband built that home with his bare hands. You'll never own a single brick of it.
He didn't reply.
He just stood, muttered something under his breath, and walked out. That night, I sat by the lake, watching the reflection of the moon tremble across the water. My hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from anger. Anger that I'd been so blind to what was happening right under my nose. It wasn't just about family anymore. It was about survival, emotional, moral, even financial. Days later, Sophie showed up at the cottage. She looked exhausted, mascara smudged, eyes red. I hadn't seen her this vulnerable since she lost her first job years ago. Can I come in? She asked softly. I nodded. She sat at the kitchen table, fiddling with her ring. Evan doesn't sleep anymore, she whispered. He blames himself for everything. Doreen keeps saying you hate us.
I don't hate anyone, I said.
But I do see things more clearly now. She looked up at me, her voice trembling.
You don't understand.
We didn't mean to take over. It just happened. My parents needed help, and Evan's always trying to fix things. He thought you'd be okay with it. I leaned back, studying her. And what about you, Sophie? Were you okay watching your mother move into my house without asking? Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't want to choose sides. Not choosing, I said quietly, is still a choice. She broke down then, her shoulders shaking. Mom's been different lately. Controlling. She and Harold fight all the time. I just wanted peace. For the first time, I saw her not as an intruder, but as a daughter lost between loyalties. I reached across the table and took her hand. Sophie, I said gently, your heart's in the right place. But sometimes love isn't about keeping peace. It's about setting boundaries. She nodded slowly, whispering, I think Mom might have done something bad. That caught my attention. What do you mean? She told Evan she found some papers in your study, something about the will. She said Dad left everything to Evan, not you. She said you changed it. I froze.
What?
Sophie nodded. I don't believe her. But Evan's been acting strange since she told him. He won't talk to me about it. My pulse quickened. I'd kept Thomas's will in a locked drawer in my study for years. The only way Doreen could have seen it was if she'd gone through my things. That night, I called Reverend Matthews. Reverend, I said, I need to see the original copy of Thomas's will, the one filed with the lawyer. When I received it the next morning, my stomach dropped. The signature on the last page, Thomas's signature, was clean, familiar, and firm. But the one on the copy Doreen must have found?
It had been tampered with.
Someone had added a new line beneath it. All property shall pass to our son, Evan Harris, upon my wife's passing. That line hadn't been there before. I knew it. Doreen had forged it. My hands trembled as I held both papers side by side. It wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was deceit. I called Evan immediately. We need to talk. When he arrived, his face was drawn, defensive. If this is about the will. It is, I said, cutting him off. Sit down. I placed both documents on the table. One is real. One is fake. You tell me which one you've been shown. He glanced between them, frowning. Mom, what's going on? Ask your mother-in-law, I said coldly. His face drained of color. You think, Doreen? I don't think. I know. He stared at the papers again, then sank into the chair. She said Dad wanted me to have everything. Your father wanted you to have a good heart, I said sharply. Not someone else's home. For the first time, I saw doubt in his eyes, not toward me, but toward them. He whispered, I don't know what to believe anymore. I softened. Believe what you see, Evan. The truth doesn't hide. It gets buried by lies. He left without saying much, but I could see the storm building inside him. 2 days later, it hit. I woke to my phone ringing nonstop, calls from neighbors, from Sophie, from Reverend Matthews. Something had happened at the house. When I got there, police cars were parked outside. Doreen stood in the driveway, screaming at Harold. Evan was on the porch, looking pale and broken. What happened? I asked, running up. Harold looked away. Your daughter-in-law's mother decided to handle things her own way. An officer approached me. Ma'am, we received a report of property damage and possible fraud. Are you Margaret Harris? Yes. He handed me a folder. Inside was a torn document, the falsified will. We found this in the fireplace. Someone tried to burn it. I turned to Doreen. Her eyes were wild. You think you can ruin my daughter's life? That house should have been Evan's. I stared at her, calm but fierce. You broke into my study. You forged my husband's will. And do you call me the problem? She lunged toward me, but Harold pulled her back. Enough, Doreen. For a moment, everything went quiet, the air thick with years of unspoken resentment. Then Evan stepped forward, his voice breaking. Mom, I'm so sorry. Tears stung my eyes, but I held my ground. Don't apologize, son. Just open your eyes. He looked at Doreen, then at me. She said it was for the family. The family doesn't steal from each other, I said softly. Police escorted Doreen and Harold away for questioning. Sophie stood there, sobbing. Evan turned to me, his face pale. What happens now? I looked at the house, the home that had once been filled with laughter and warmth, now cold and fractured. Now, I said quietly, we learn who this family really is. As I walked back to my car, I felt the weight of everything pressing down. Love, betrayal, grief, it all blurred together. But beneath it, something else began to rise. Strength. They had tried to erase me from my own life. But I was still here, still standing. What I didn't know then was that the real storm hadn't even started. Because the next morning, I received a letter in the mail, one that made my heart stop cold. It was from my lawyer, and it began with the words, Mrs. Harris, as per your late husband's instructions, a secondary clause has just been unsealed regarding your estate. I froze, gripping the letter as the world tilted around me. Whatever Thomas had written, whatever secret he'd hidden, was about to change everything. She thought the truth had come out, but her late husband's secret was still waiting in the shadows. Don't miss the next twist, where love and justice finally collide. When I held that letter from my lawyer, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I sat on the porch of my small lake cottage, the morning sun reflecting off the water like liquid fire. Birds chirped in the distance, but all I could hear was my heartbeat and the whisper of my late husband's name, Thomas. The envelope had been sealed for years, waiting for a moment only my lawyer knew about. Now, after all the chaos with Doreen and the forged will, it had finally reached me. I opened it slowly, my eyes scanning the neat, familiar handwriting. Margaret, it began, if you're reading this, then it means time has tested you again. I wanted to make sure that our home and our values were protected, no matter what storm might come. In this envelope, you'll find a document, something I kept hidden for a reason. My fingers found a second folded sheet inside. It was a deed, not for the house, but for a savings account in both my and Evan's names. A fund Thomas had created long ago, titled the Harris Legacy Trust. At the bottom of the letter, Thomas had written, if ever our family loses its way, this trust will remind them of what truly matters: honesty, unity, and respect. The account can only be accessed when you, Margaret, and our son, Evan, stand together. Tears welled up in my eyes. My husband, even from the grave, had foreseen this storm and left a path through it. But there was a catch. If Evan refused to stand with me, the trust would dissolve. The money, everything Thomas had saved, would be donated to a local charity. I sat there for a long time, the weight of the choice pressing on me. This wasn't just about money. It was about redemption, truth, and family. That evening, I called Evan. Son, I said quietly, I received a letter from your father's lawyer. It's about the house and more. He hesitated. I don't know if I'm ready to talk yet, Mom. You don't have to be ready, I said. You just have to show up. For him. There was silence on the line. Then a soft, all right, tomorrow. The next day, he arrived at the cottage, alone this time. He looked older than his years, his eyes tired and red. I laid the documents on the table. Your father wrote this before he died. He knew something like this could happen. Evan read quietly, his lips tightening with each word. When he reached the part about standing together, his eyes filled. He always believed in family, he whispered. So do I said softly. But family doesn't mean letting people walk over you. He nodded, shame shadowing his face. I let them control everything. I thought I was protecting Sophie. You were trying, I said gently. But sometimes love means saying no. We talked for hours, about Thomas, about the past, about how easily love can turn into guilt. When he finally looked up, his voice broke. I want to make this right, Mom. Whatever it takes. I smiled through tears. Then we'll do it together. That night, We called my lawyer and arranged a meeting, not just to secure the trust, but to expose Doreen's forgery once and for all. By the following week, everything was set. The lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, met us at his office, a quiet man with kind eyes and a sharp sense of justice. "Mrs. Harris," he said, "I've filed a report with the authorities. The forged will has been confirmed as fraudulent. Doreen and Harold will be formally charged." Evan exhaled, relief mixing with disbelief. "I can't believe she'd go that far." "Greed blinds people," Caldwell said. "But you both have something stronger, proof and integrity." After signing a few papers, I and Evan finalized the Harris Legacy Trust. The moment we both signed, Caldwell smiled. "It's done. Your husband's wishes have been honored." I felt a deep calm spread through me. Thomas's voice echoed in my heart. "Stand together." But peace, as always, was short-lived. That evening, as we were driving back, Evan received a call from Sophie. Her voice was trembling. "Evan, you need to come home. Mom's at the house, she's not well." We rushed over. Doreen was sitting on the porch steps, hair messy, eyes red from crying. Police cars were gone. Charges hadn't yet turned into jail time. But her pride, that invincible wall she'd built, had crumbled. She looked up at me. "You won, didn't you?" I stayed quiet. "I just wanted my daughter to have stability," she said, her voice breaking. "We lost everything when Harold's business went under. I thought if she and Evan had the house, she'd be safe." "You wanted safety," I said softly. "But you went looking for it in someone else's home." Her eyes glistened. "You think I don't know that now? You think I haven't paid enough?" Behind her, Harold stood silently, guilt written across his face. Evan stepped forward. "Doreen, you didn't just hurt my mother. You almost tore this family apart." She buried her face in her hands. "I didn't mean to." "Intent doesn't erase damage," I said quietly. "But remorse is a start." The air hung heavy with silence. Then Sophie came outside, holding a small box. "Mom," she said softly, "it's time to let go." Doreen looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and broke down completely. Sophie knelt beside her, wrapping her arms around the woman who'd caused so much pain, yet was still her mother. I turned away, tears burning behind my eyes. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was something close, a first step. That night, back at the cottage, I sat on the porch again with Evan. The moonlight shimmered across the lake, calm and endless. "I didn't expect any of this," he said quietly. "Life doesn't give warnings," I replied. "It gives chances and sometimes second ones." He smiled faintly. "You're stronger than I ever realized." I chuckled.
No, son.
"I just stopped being afraid." He nodded slowly. "Mom, about the house." "I don't want it." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I want it to stay yours. You and Dad built that life. I'll build my own." My heart swelled. That's all I ever wanted. We sat there for a while, quiet except for the crickets. For the first time in months, I felt peace, the real kind, not the fragile calm before a storm. But then, as I walked inside, I noticed an envelope on my coffee table.
No postie.
No name, just my address written in a familiar, shaky hand. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You think this is over. But Thomas had secrets too. Ask yourself why he made that trust in the first place." There was no signature, but I knew that handwriting Doreen's. My chest tightened. For months, I'd believed my husband's trust was an act of love and foresight. But what if it had been something else? What if there really was a reason he'd hidden it all these years? I stared out at the dark lake, my reflection barely visible. The calm that had filled me just minutes earlier began to shift again, not into fear, but into readiness. Because I knew, deep down, this wasn't the end. It was only the quiet before the final storm. She finally found peace, but one letter reopened a secret her husband had buried long ago. Don't miss upcoming twist, where truth and redemption meet for the last time. That night, The envelope sat on my table like a ghost from the past. Doreen's handwriting, shaky yet sharp, crawled across the page, taunting me with that single line. Ask yourself why Thomas made that trust in the first place. The lake outside was silent, still, almost too calm, like the world was holding its breath. I sat by the window, the moon reflecting on the water, and whispered, "Thomas, what did you keep from me?" The next morning, I called Mr. Caldwell, our lawyer. He answered on the second ring, his voice steady as always. "Mrs. Harris, is everything all right?" "I need to see you," I said. "It's about the trust, and something my husband might have hidden." An hour later, I was in his office, the same old room with the faint smell of wood polish and history. He looked at the note I'd brought and sighed. "I thought this might surface one day," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" "Thomas came to me a few months before he passed. He made changes to the trust that he didn't want to explain fully, only that it was to protect the truth. He made me promise not to reveal it unless you specifically asked." My heart thudded. "And I'm asking now." He nodded, unlocked a small drawer, and pulled out a sealed folder with my name written on it. Inside were several old letters, each one labeled by year. The most recent was dated 3 months before Thomas died. I took a deep breath and unfolded it. "My dearest Margaret," it began, "if you're reading this, it means the time for truth has come. Years ago, before Evan was born, I made a business deal that went terribly wrong. I trusted a partner who wasn't honest, and to protect our family, I signed over our house, temporarily, under another name. That man was Harold Grayson." My hands froze. Harold Grayson, Doreen's husband. I kept reading. I fought to get it back, and eventually I did. But to avoid public scandal, I left the documents under Caldwell's care and built the trust to ensure the house could never again be taken or forged away. If anything ever happened between our families, this would bring the truth to light. I felt the world tilt slightly under my feet. Harold hadn't just known me through Sophie's marriage, he'd known Thomas long before. And Thomas had carried that secret all these years. Caldwell spoke softly. "Your husband never wanted you to carry that burden. He wanted protection for you, not pain." I wiped a tear from my cheek. And now Doreen's note makes sense. She must have known about Harold's involvement, maybe from old papers. He nodded. "It's possible, but there's one more thing." He handed me another envelope, smaller, older, yellowed at the edges. It was addressed to Evan. When I got home, Evan was waiting at the cottage. I handed him the letter silently. He opened it, reading aloud. "Son, you may one day face a choice between loyalty and truth. I hope you'll choose truth, even if it hurts. Because real strength isn't in defending what's easy, it's in doing what's right, even when it breaks your heart." Evan's voice trembled. He knew everything. "Yes," I said quietly. And he trusted us to finish what he started. We decided together it was time for closure. The next week, we invited Doreen and Harold to meet us one last time at the house that had caused so much division. It was no longer just property. It was a battlefield of memories and lessons. When they arrived, Harold couldn't look me in the eye. Doreen stood beside him, frail and quiet. I laid the documents on the dining table, Thomas's letter, the old deed, and the trust papers. "This is the truth," I said firmly. "Thomas and Harold had a history. And it was your husband's name this house once carried. But Thomas fixed that. He protected what mattered, not the house itself, but our family's integrity." Doreen gasped softly, turning to Harold. "Is that true?" He swallowed hard. "Yes. I made mistakes long before any of this. Thomas covered for me. I never told you because I was ashamed." Her face crumpled, the anger and pride melting away into something raw and human. All this time, we were fighting over something built on lies. Evan spoke gently. "Maybe now we can stop fighting." The room was heavy with silence. Then Doreen took a deep breath and whispered, "I'm sorry, Margaret. For everything." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet but real. And in that moment, I saw not the manipulative woman who'd tried to steal my home, but a mother who'd been lost, frightened, desperate to hold on to her world as it fell apart. I nodded slowly. I forgive you. Tears fell down her cheeks, and for the first time, she didn't hide them. We stood there together, four people bound by secrets, pain, and now, understanding. A week later, I visited the lake at sunset. Evan joined me, holding two small envelopes. One for Dad, he said softly, placing his on the water. And one for the future, he added, handing me the other. Inside was a note that read, "For Mom, because home isn't a place, it's the peace you carry after the storm." I smiled, watching the golden ripples carry Thomas's memory across the water. Life hadn't turned out the way I'd imagined. I'd lost my home, found the truth, and learned that sometimes walking away isn't giving up. It's standing tall in silence while others finally hear the echoes of their own mistakes. The trust remained untouched. Evan insisted it be used one day for something meaningful, a scholarship in Thomas's name. As for me, I stayed in my cottage by the lake. The peace there was different now, not lonely, not empty, just earned. Every morning, I make coffee, sit on the porch, and whisper to the wind, "We did it, Thomas. We really did." When I see Sophie and Evan visit, their laughter filling the air again, I know the storm has finally passed. Because forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it simply builds a bridge strong enough to carry you beyond it. And as I watch the sun dip behind the trees, the reflection golden on the lake, I think of the lesson I'll leave behind, one every mother, every wife, every woman must one day learn. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones fought in silence. But if you fight them with love, you never truly lose. I didn't just move out of my son's house, I moved into peace. And that's something no one can ever take from me.